The first time Marcus noticed the silver Tesla in his driveway, he assumed it was a guest. The second time, 3 days later, he started paying attention. By the seventh time, he was furious. Marcus Chen had installed the level 3 Tesla charger himself 8 months ago. He'd spent $2,800 on the equipment, another $1,500 on installation and electrical upgrades, and an additional $400 on the solar panels that fed power into his home system. It was supposed to be convenient, park in his own driveway, wake up with a full charge. Instead, every morning brought the same silver Model 3 taking up the spot, its California license plate gleaming in the morning sun like a taunt. He'd tried everything the reasonable way first. On day 9, he left a polite note on her windshield. "Hi, I noticed you've been parking at my charger. It's private property. I hope you understand I need to use it for my own vehicle. Thanks for being considerate." The note disappeared. The car came back the next morning. Day 17, Marcus knocked on her door. She answered in a silk robe, her blonde hair in an elaborate braid, her nails the color of a tropical sunset. Behind her, he could hear a Peloton bike whirring, some influencer's voice screaming motivational platitudes. "Hi, I'm Marcus Chen from 3 houses down," he'd said, keeping his voice pleasant. "I think we might have gotten our wires crossed. The charger in your parking spot actually belongs to me. It's on my property. I need to use it for my Rivian." She'd looked at him like he'd spoken in Mandarin, which he actually could fluently, but that wasn't the point. "Oh my God, seriously?" She'd laughed, a sharp, trilling sound. "That charger isn't even being used. I charge overnight and I'm gone by 7. You don't even have an EV in your driveway." "I'm getting one next month," Marcus had said, feeling his jaw tighten. "But that's not really the point. It's on my property." "Look," she'd interrupted, examining her nails with theatrical disinterest. "I've got a dead battery half the time. My husband won't let me use the one in our driveway because he says I'm obsessed with driving around the neighborhood. So this is perfect for me, very convenient. You probably won't even notice." "I do notice," Marcus had said quietly, "every morning." "Well, you should probably get used to it," she'd said, and closed the door in his face. Her name was Karen. He learned this not from asking, but from the countless Ring doorbell packages that showed up with her name on the label. Karen Patterson. She lived at 487 Oak Ridge Lane, the McMansion at the top of the hill, white brick ridiculous columns, a driveway already equipped with a level 2 charger. He had no idea why she needed his. The first month of her unauthorized parking felt like an invasion. Marcus found himself waking at 5 a.m., lying in bed, listening for the sound of her car arriving, imagining scenarios where he blocked his own driveway so she couldn't get in. He fantasized about what he'd say to her, about the HOA complaints he could file, about how satisfying it would be to have her car towed. But Marcus wasn't a confrontational person. He was an electrical engineer, 37 years old, divorced without children, the kind of man who preferred reading to parties and who still felt a twinge of anxiety when raising his voice. His therapist, Dr. Patricia, called it conflict avoidance rooted in childhood peacekeeping. His ex-wife had called it emotional constipation. Either way, Marcus chose silence over confrontation most of the time. By month 2, the fury had calcified into something colder, resentment. And resentment, Marcus would learn, was far more creative than anger. He started paying attention to her patterns. She always arrived between 6:15 and 6:45 p.m., always left between 6:45 and 7:15 a.m. She plugged in 6 days a week. Saturdays and Sundays were inconsistent. Sometimes she used the charger, sometimes she didn't. Her car consumed approximately 22 kilowatt-hours per charge cycle, roughly equivalent to $4.50 in electricity at his local rates. He kept a spreadsheet. He calculated totals. By day 87, Karen had stolen $375 worth of electricity from him. The number became an obsession, growing daily, compound interest style, like a debt she'd never acknowledge. Then came October, and a conversation with his colleague Michael at work. They were in the break room of Chen and Associates Engineering, where Marcus worked as a senior systems designer. Michael was microwaving something that smelled like regret and fish oil. "Dude," Michael said, leaning against the counter, "you look like someone murdered your dog." "I don't have a dog," Marcus said. "Exactly my point. Something's eating you alive." Marcus, for reasons he couldn't entirely explain, found himself describing the situation. Michael listened with the kind of rapt attention usually reserved for championship playoff games. "Wait," Michael interrupted. "She's charging her car on your dime every single day." 6 days a week, yeah. "That's theft," Michael said simply. "Economic theft, the law would back you up." "I don't want to take her to court." "I'm not talking about court," Michael said, and then he smiled, a smile that contained multitudes, most of them terrible. "I'm talking about something way more elegant." Michael worked in cybersecurity. His idea, which he spent the next 20 minutes explaining, was technically brilliant and absolutely genius in its execution. The solution was elegant, quantifiable, and this was the part that made Marcus hesitate only briefly, deeply vindictive. "Install a smart lock on the charger port," Michael had explained, gesturing with his fish-smelling fork for emphasis. "Biometric or RFID. You program the authorization to your car only. When her vehicle tries to connect, the lock engages. Physically prevents her from charging. She gets nothing. No power transfer, just mechanical rejection." "That seems," Marcus had trailed off. "Just," Michael had finished, "or perfect." "Illegal, maybe." "It's your property," Michael had said, shrugging. "You're securing your own equipment. That's not illegal. That's just being a homeowner." Michael had sent him 3 product links that night. By the time Marcus got home, he'd watched 17 YouTube videos on smart lock installation. By the next morning, he'd made a decision. The lock arrived on a Tuesday. It was titanium, about the size of a thick wallet, with a sleek digital interface and enough encryption to secure a nuclear submarine. The installation took him 40 minutes. He programmed the biometric scanner to recognize his Rivian, which he'd finally ordered and would be arriving in 2 weeks, and his existing car's RFID chip. Corinne's Tesla was locked out permanently. Marcus set it up on a Thursday afternoon. By Thursday evening, he was having second thoughts. This wasn't a note. This wasn't a conversation. This was active, deliberate sabotage of her ability to charge her vehicle, a vehicle that, in the modern world, was as essential as a bicycle in the 1920s. What if she had an emergency? What if she was driving somewhere important and needed to charge? That was her problem, a voice inside him said. That had always been her problem. He was done solving it. He spent Thursday night watching the security camera feed of his driveway on his laptop, waiting for her usual arrival time. 6:27 p.m., right on schedule. The silver Tesla pulled in, rolling smoothly into the spot like it owned it. She got out of the car. He could see her face clearly now, something he tried not to notice. She was pretty in the way of people who spent considerable money on self-maintenance, her jawline sharp, her expression serene. She approached the charger. Even through the tiny camera feed, Marcus could see the moment confusion crossed her face. She reached toward the port and the lock, his lock, glowed red instead of the normal welcoming green. She tried again, red again, red. She checked her phone. She looked at the charger like it had personally insulted her. Then, characteristically, she didn't try to problem-solve or investigate. She just got back in her car and left. Marcus didn't sleep that night. By Friday morning, the weight of what he'd done had settled into his stomach like a stone. He kept telling himself he'd made the right choice. She was trespassing, she was stealing, she was contemptuous, she deserved consequences. But the stone in his stomach didn't care about his justifications. By Friday evening, when she didn't show up, Marcus realized he was actually holding his breath, waiting for her reaction, wanting it and dreading it simultaneously. The driveway remained empty, dark. His charger glowed a satisfied blue, ready to serve a vehicle that didn't exist yet. And then on Saturday morning, something unexpected happened. A sheriff's truck pulled up to his driveway. The sheriff's deputy was a large man in his 50s, with the kind of sunburn that suggested a lifetime spent outdoors. He approached Marcus's door with the unhurried confidence of someone who'd done this exact thing 100 times before. "Marcus Chen?" he asked, reading from a notepad. "Yes," Marcus's mouth had gone dry. His hands were shaking. This wasn't supposed to involve law enforcement. This was supposed to be what exactly? Quiet, effective, righteous. "We've got a complaint filed by a Corinne Patterson, 487 Oak Ridge Lane. Says you've deliberately disabled charging equipment that she was previously permitted to use." "She wasn't permitted," Marcus said, hearing his own voice sound strangely thin. "She was trespassing." "On private property to charge a vehicle," the deputy said, nodding along like this explained everything. Yeah, I understand that position. Here's what I'm gonna tell you. The property line issue is civil, not criminal. You'd need to take that to small claims if you wanted damages, but the equipment disabling, that's where we get complicated. I disabled my own equipment, Marcus said, on my own property. But you did it specifically to prevent her from accessing a service she was actively using, the deputy said. That could be considered tortious interference with her property rights, malicious interference with business and economic relations. There's also the electricity theft claim she's making on your end, which she's willing to drop if you reactivate the charger, and we call this resolved. Marcus felt the world tilt slightly on its axis. She's threatening to sue me. I'm not her lawyer, the deputy said, but I'd strongly recommend you consider mediation or just reactivate the charger. Seems like the simplest resolution. After the deputy left, Marcus sat on his living room couch for 3 hours, staring at a wall. His ex-wife had left him because he wasn't decisive, but whenever he made decisions, they seemed to go sideways like this. Was he supposed to have anticipated that she would contact the police? Was he supposed to have known there were legal complexities involved in securing his own equipment? He called Michael. This is actually good, Michael said, which was not the response Marcus had expected. This means you rattled her cage. She's upset enough to involve authorities. That means it's working. It means she's threatening to sue me, Marcus said flatly. She's bluffing, Michael said with complete certainty. Tortious interference with your own property, that case is so weak it would fall apart in a single courtroom conversation. But here's what matters. You've got her attention now, and that's where leverage lives. I don't want leverage, Marcus said. I want her to leave me alone. Same thing, Michael said. Trust me on this. Play it cool for a week, see what happens. What happened was worse. Karen came to his house on Monday morning. She was different than she'd been on their previous encounter. Her hair was down instead of braided, and she was wearing workout clothes that probably cost more than Marcus's entire sneaker collection. She also looked furious in a way that seemed to amplify her beauty. Her blue eyes were bright with indignation, her jaw set, her entire posture radiating the kind of angry energy that made Marcus want to open his door but also run away simultaneously. You broke my charger, she said before he could even greet her. I secured my property, Marcus said, staying inside the doorway, not inviting her in, which is completely legal. My attorney says otherwise, she said, holding up her phone. He caught a glimpse of an email chain with a surname that looked vaguely familiar, probably someone she knew from the tennis club or the country club or whatever social hierarchy she participated in. But I'm not here to fight. I'm here to propose a solution. Despite everything, Marcus was curious. I'm listening. Your charger works with Tesla. I have a Tesla. There's obvious synergy here. She smiled, and it was a strange smile, forced but containing a kernel of something that might have been genuine humor. Obviously, I was using it without permission, which was wrong. I get that. My therapist actually agrees with you, believe it or not. But I also can't find another charging station anywhere in this neighborhood that doesn't have a 3-week waiting list. The infrastructure in Oak Ridge is terrible, which you should probably fix with the HOA, but that's another conversation. Okay, Marcus said slowly. So here's what I'm proposing. I'll pay you monthly fee. I'll use the charger, you get compensated, I get my car charged. Win-win situation, let's say. $150 a month. Marcus had calculated that she was stealing approximately $135 worth of electricity monthly. $150 would actually represent a small profit. I'm not running a charging station, he said. I know, Karen said, and there was something in her tone that made him look at her more carefully. She seemed almost nervous, which is why I'm also offering to cover half the maintenance costs on the charger itself. Deal. It was a reasonable offer, objectively reasonable. The kind of offer that made Marcus realize he might have been behaving irrationally. She was solving the problem. She was acknowledging wrongdoing. She was compensating him fairly. And that was why he knew it was a trap. Why would you do that? He asked. Why not just get the HOA to install a public charging station or negotiate something with the developer? Because, Karen said, dropping the smile like it had burned her, I've already tried those things. The HOA can't afford it. The developer says it's a residential area, not a commercial zone. And the public stations have a 3-week reservation system that would require me to plan my charging schedule like I'm going into combat. I like your charger because it's convenient. I like it being here. There was something in the way she said this, the flatness of it, that made Marcus suddenly uncomfortable. It wasn't just about charging. This was personal somehow. Or maybe he was overthinking it. Maybe she just really liked convenient parking. I need to think about it, Marcus heard himself say. That's fair, Karen said, and she handed him a business card. It was cream-colored stock with gold lettering. Karen Patterson, VP of Marketing, Patterson and Associates Wellness Consulting. That's my work number. I'm serious about this. Let's resolve it like adults. She walked back to her car, and Marcus noticed for the first time that her Tesla's battery indicator, visible on her dashboard, was at 17%. Low enough to be concerning. Low enough that driving anywhere would be a genuine risk. He thought about this for the rest of the day. He thought about it while he ate lunch. He thought about it while he reviewed the solar panel output on his phone. And by evening, he'd almost decided to accept her offer. Then he made the mistake of checking his security camera footage from the past 3 days. The lock had worked perfectly. Karen's Tesla had tried to charge 3 times since he'd activated it, and each time the port had rejected her. He could see the moment of confusion on her face each time, the slight acceleration of her movements, the growing frustration. But he could also see something else on Saturday morning, captured at 3:47 a.m. that changed everything. Karen was standing in his driveway at the charger, holding something that looked like a flathead screwdriver. She was trying to disassemble the lock. Not aggressively, carefully, almost surgically, like she thought she could engineer her way around his security measure. She'd spent 20 minutes working on it before giving up and walking away. She hadn't been upset, she'd been intrigued. She'd been trying to problem solve. Marcus watched the footage again, then again, and in that moment something crystallized inside him. Karen Patterson wasn't annoying because she was rude or entitled. She was annoying because she couldn't accept no as an answer. She had to push to negotiate to find a workaround. She was like a chess player who wouldn't acknowledge checkmate. Which meant her offer wasn't a surrender. It was a negotiation tactic, a way of getting what she wanted while making Marcus feel like he'd won something. He called her the next morning and declined. She tried to increase the offer to $200 a month. He declined again. By Friday, she was offering $300 a month, free maintenance, and what she called a significant gesture of goodwill, which she refused to specify over the phone. Marcus declined everything. And Karen Patterson, for the first time, seemed to understand that he actually meant no. The following Monday, she had someone at his house, a technician in a white van, the kind of vehicle usually associated with home security or IT services. Marcus watched from his window as the man examined the charger, made some notes, and then handed Karen a tablet. She signed something, and then the technician removed something from the Tesla's charging port, something that looked like a small device. A hardware bypass, that's what it was. Some kind of portable charging interface that didn't require the Tesla charger at all. Karen got back into her car, started it, and the man plugged the device into her vehicle. Within seconds, he could see the charging indicator light up inside her Tesla. She was charging anyway, just not using his charger. For approximately 4 minutes, Marcus felt triumph. He watched Karen drive away, felt the satisfaction of knowing his security measure had forced her to spend presumably thousands of dollars on alternative charging technology. He'd won. She'd had to innovate because he'd left her no choice. Then his doorbell rang at 6:15 p.m. and Karen returned, but not alone. The man with her was older, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Marcus's annual car insurance. He had the kind of posture that suggested wealth and authority in equal measure, and his expression suggested he was not particularly happy to be in Marcus's driveway. "Marcus Chen," the man said, extending his hand. "I'm David Patterson, Karen's husband." Marcus shook the hand, feeling his stomach tighten into a knot. "I understand you've been causing my wife some difficulty regarding the charger on your property," David Patterson said, skipping past any pleasantries. "I wanted to discuss this face-to-face because I believe most neighborhood conflicts can be resolved through reasonable conversation." "She was using my charger without permission," Marcus said, hatting the defensive tone in his voice. "Yes," David Patterson said with the kind of acknowledgement that didn't actually concede anything. "And I understand your frustration. Karen can be persistent. It's one of her strengths in business, but it can be an irritant in personal contexts. He smiled, and it was the smile of someone used to making problems disappear with a combination of money and charisma. So here's what I'm thinking. Karen values convenience. You value, what would you say you value? Respect for property rights. Acknowledgement of boundaries. Both, Marcus said. Great, so here's an elegant solution. I'm going to purchase the entire lot to your east. That's where the Thompson house currently sits, which is being foreclosed on as we speak. I'm going to buy that property, and I'm going to install a commercial-grade charging station there. Multiple ports, open to the neighborhood. It'll increase property values for everyone, including yours. And, David continued smoothly, Karen will no longer have any reason to use your charger. It was, objectively, a generous solution. The kind of solution that would actually improve the neighborhood. The kind of solution that demonstrated real power. The power to solve problems not through negotiation, but through direct action and financial might. And Marcus hated it. Not because it was a bad solution, but because it represented a kind of concession. It meant that David Patterson could simply write a check and make problems go away. It meant that Karen had complained to her wealthy husband, and rather than learning a lesson about boundaries and respecting property, she'd received a solution that bypassed the entire concept of consequences. How long will that take? Marcus asked. 3 to 4 months for the purchase and permitting. Construction another 2 months, so call it 6 months total. And in the meantime, Karen will leave your charger alone, David Patterson said. She'll stop using it. Problem solved until the new station is built, at which point she'll have options. Marcus nodded slowly. It was a reasonable compromise. It was the kind of thing his therapist would probably recommend. It was the kind of thing a mature adult would accept. Okay, Marcus heard himself say, that works for me. David Patterson smiled, shook his hand again, and left. Karen gave Marcus a little wave from the driveway, as if they'd just negotiated a peace treaty between friendly nations rather than resolved a conflict about electricity theft. That night, Marcus called Michael and told him what had happened. This is actually perfect, Michael said, which had become Michael's favorite phrase. David Patterson just made a huge investment to protect his wife's stealing habit. That's leverage. What are you talking about? Marcus asked. I'm talking about the fact that you now have David Patterson's commitment to solve a problem he created by enabling Karen's behavior, Michael said. He's already bought in emotionally and financially. He wants to be seen as a problem solver. That's exactly the kind of pressure point we can exploit. I'm not exploiting anything, Marcus said. He's buying a lot and building a charging station that actually solves the problem. For him, Michael said. Not for you, not really. See, what's going to happen is David's going to start the process of buying the Thompson property. It's going to take 3 months. During those 3 months, Karen's going to be gone every day, charging at her own house with that portable device you saw. Everything's going to seem fine. Then the purchase goes through, the construction begins, and suddenly you've got a commercial charging station 50 feet from your property line. Do you know what happens then? Property values might go up, but so does traffic. So does noise. So does the general degradation of the neighborhood aesthetic. You'll have been played. Maybe, Marcus said, but at least Karen stops using my charger and the neighborhood gets better infrastructure. Jesus, Michael said, you really don't see it, do you? See what? You're the one who should have had leverage all along, Michael said. She was stealing from you. You took action. She should have apologized and left you alone. Instead, her husband threw money at the problem so his wife wouldn't have to experience consequences. That's not resolution. That's enabling. Marcus didn't respond for a long moment. What are you suggesting? He finally asked. I'm suggesting, Michael said slowly, that you've got one more play here. One more move before everything settles into the new normal. And if you make it right, you actually win this. The plan Michael proposed was subtle in the way that the best psychological warfare often is. It required no hacking, no destruction of property, and most importantly, no direct involvement from Marcus himself. It required only information. Information that Michael had certain channels for obtaining. Information about David Patterson's property acquisition strategy, his financing, his timeline. If we can delay the purchase by 6 months, Michael explained over drinks on Friday night, Karen goes back to using your charger. Or she escalates further, tries to take legal action, involves authorities again, makes a bigger mess. And either way, David Patterson's starting to look incompetent. His wife's not satisfied. His solution isn't working fast enough. That's when pressure builds. I'm not interested in applying pressure, Marcus said. No, Michael agreed, but David Patterson doesn't know that. What Michael proposed, and what Marcus, against his better judgment, eventually allowed to happen, was a campaign of strategic delay. Nothing illegal, nothing even particularly nefarious. Just some calls to permit offices by people claiming to represent a concerned neighborhood group about commercial development in a residential zone. Just some communications to the city council about traffic and environmental impact. Just enough bureaucratic friction to slow down what should have been a straightforward acquisition. Marcus didn't make the calls himself. He didn't need to. Michael had contacts. Michael had, as he put it, resources. And it worked. By week 3 of what was supposed to be a simple property purchase, David Patterson's acquisition had hit complications. The Thompson house was being pulled into an estate dispute. Apparently, one of the foreclosed owner's relatives had contested the bank's authority to sell. The permit for commercial development in a residential zone, usually a formality, was suddenly requiring a full environmental impact assessment. Nothing that mentioned Marcus. Nothing that implicated him in any way. Just the kind of random bureaucratic friction that sometimes happens in real estate transactions. By week 5, Marcus received a phone call from David Patterson. I'm wondering if we should revisit our agreement, David said, his smooth confidence slightly cracked. The property acquisition is taking longer than anticipated. There seem to be some complications. I heard, Marcus said, keeping his voice neutral. I'm going to be honest with you, David continued. Corinne's been using your charger again, just a few times a week, just when her battery is low. I understand it's a violation of our understanding, but I wanted to come to you directly rather than having another confrontation. She's using my charger, Marcus said, as if he wasn't aware of this from checking his security camera footage obsessively every morning. Yes, David admitted, and I apologize. The delay in acquiring the new property means Corinne's found herself in a compromised position with charging infrastructure. I'm working on solutions, but in the interim, would you be willing to allow her limited access? Say, twice a week with a paid subscription. Marcus felt the weight of the moment. This was the play Michael had been talking about. This was David Patterson, defeated, coming to negotiate from a position of weakness. This was Corinne, still using the charger despite having another option, dependent on his willingness to accommodate her. He could say yes, accept the money, and feel victorious. Or he could say no, reinforce the lesson that there were real consequences for violating boundaries, and accept that he'd become the kind of person who weaponized bureaucracy against his neighbors. Tell Corinne she can use the charger, Marcus heard himself say. Free, no subscription, no fee, tell her she doesn't need permission anymore. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I'm sorry, David Patterson said. Tell her she doesn't need to pay. She can use it whenever she needs to, no restrictions. Why would you? David trailed off, genuinely confused. Because I'm tired, Marcus said simply. I'm tired of this conflict. I'm tired of strategizing about it. Tell Corinne the charger is open to her whenever she needs it. I don't care anymore. After he hung up, Marcus felt something shift inside him. It was like setting down a weight he'd been carrying so long he'd forgotten he was bearing it. The whole thing, the frustration, the violation, the need to win, suddenly seemed absurd. It was a charger. It was electricity. It was nothing worth this much energy. By the next morning, Corinne's Tesla was back in his driveway, plugged into his charger, and Marcus felt absolutely nothing about it. That was a mistake. Marcus went to work on Thursday feeling lighter than he had in months. He'd reached a resolution. He'd let go of the anger. He'd moved into forgiveness. He was, he thought, becoming a better person. Michael noticed immediately. You told her yes, Michael said, cornering him in the break room. You told David Patterson yes, didn't you? How did you know that? Because you look like someone who just walked into a very carefully laid trap, Michael said. Tell me you didn't fall for the oldest play in the book. It's fine, Marcus said. Let her use the charger, it doesn't cost me anything. It costs you everything, Michael said, and his voice had taken on a new quality. Not his usual conspiracy theory enthusiasm, but something harder, colder. It costs you respect. It costs you boundaries. It costs you the acknowledgement that you were right and she was wrong. You just taught her that if she waits long enough, if she whines enough, if she brings in her rich husband to apply counterpressure, eventually you'll just roll over. She's not going to keep bothering me, Marcus said, but even as he said it, he knew Michael was right. Yes, she is, Michael said flatly. She absolutely is. And Michael was correct, because that's exactly what happened. The first sign was the package that arrived on Saturday. Marcus opened it to find a gift basket, the kind of thing people sent when they wanted to simultaneously apologize and one-up their recipient. It was filled with expensive tea, artisanal honey, organic chocolate, and a handwritten note that read, "Thank you for your kindness and understanding. You're a good neighbor. Karen." Marcus put the basket in his pantry and tried not to think about what it meant. The second sign was more subtle. He started noticing Karen standing in her driveway when he was standing in his, not approaching him, but just existing in his general proximity. Sometimes she'd wave. Sometimes she'd smile. Sometimes she'd do absolutely nothing except create the impression of neighborly awareness. The third sign was the invitation. The Pattersons' Christmas party, according to the thick cardstock that arrived on December 1st, was cordially requesting the pleasure of Marcus Chen's company. It was at their house. It was black tie optional. It promised cocktails, catering, and holiday cheer. Marcus had never been invited to a party at the Patterson house. He didn't socialize with people at the Patterson house's income level. He definitely didn't want to spend an evening making small talk with people who probably didn't know his name without checking the invitation. He threw the invitation away. Karen brought it back to him, literally walked it to his door on December 3rd, and said, "I think this must have gotten lost in your mail." "I got it," Marcus said. "I'm not really a party person." "Neither am I," Karen said, which was so clearly a lie that Marcus almost laughed. "But David does these things for his business. It would mean a lot to me if you came, just for an hour, just to prove that we're not the kind of neighbors who hold grudges." The emphasis on "we're not the kind" made it clear that Karen thought Marcus was holding a grudge, and that she was generously offering him a path to redemption through attendance at her party. "I'll think about it," Marcus said and closed the door. He got 3 more reminders, one via email from a generic event management service, one via a text message from Karen's personal phone, and one through his doorbell camera where Karen dropped off a second invitation in a decorative envelope. He didn't go to the party, but he watched the security footage of her arriving, dressed in a gown that probably cost more than his monthly rent, her hair in complicated curls, her posture regal. She looked happy. She looked like someone who always got what she wanted. And somehow, watching her, Marcus realized something that changed everything. Karen had already won. She'd taken his charger. She'd violated his boundaries. She'd escalated it to authorities. She'd had her husband attempt to buy her way out of the situation. When that failed, she'd waited for him to capitulate. And now, having gotten what she wanted, she was gracefully accepting his surrender by pretending to befriend him. By inviting him to her party, she was establishing a narrative where they were equals, where the whole thing had been a misunderstanding that 2 reasonable neighbors could work past, where she hadn't done anything wrong. They'd both just been acting irrationally until they found their way to civility. It was, Marcus realized, actually brilliant. She was erasing his victory, his refusal, his boundary setting, by reframing the entire situation as a miscommunication. And the worst part was that he'd let her do it. He'd capitulated so thoroughly that she could now offer forgiveness for something that she had started. That night, Marcus went into his garage and looked at the security lock system for the charger. It was still there, still active, still functional. He'd just forgotten to use it. He'd taken the passive approach, left it dormant, let Karen use the charger at will. He could reactivate it tomorrow. One click in his app and the charger would return to being locked. One decision and he could restart this entire conflict. But Michael's words came back to him. "You just taught her that if she waits long enough, if she whines enough, if she brings in her rich husband to apply counterpressure, eventually you'll just roll over." What if Marcus didn't roll over? What if he reactivated the lock and kept it reactivated, regardless of the consequences? What if he forced her to actually accept the no he'd been too weak to maintain? He opened his app, found the charger, and there right in front of him was the reactivation button. He thought about Dr. Patricia, his therapist, who would probably tell him he was reacting from a place of wounded ego. He thought about the mature, evolved version of himself that had decided to let this go. He thought about the fact that it was just electricity. It was just a charger. It was just not worth this much emotional energy. Then he thought about something Michael had said. Play it cool for a week, see what happens. Marcus had done exactly that. He'd played it cool. He'd let her think she'd won. And now, in the week before Christmas, when reactivating the lock would be maximally inconvenient for her, he was going to do it. He pressed the button. The app confirmed, charger locked. Authorization, Marcus Chen vehicle only. His heart was pounding. He felt like he'd just done something both incredibly stupid and incredibly necessary. The next morning at 6:47 a.m., Coren's Tesla pulled into his driveway as it always did. It pulled in smoothly, confidently, and then, for the first time in weeks, it approached the charger not as a welcome guest, but as an intruder attempting to access restricted property. He watched through the security camera as she exited the vehicle, as she approached the charger port, as the lock rejected her, glowing red instead of the welcoming blue-green she'd grown accustomed to. She stared at the charger for a long moment. Then she looked directly at his camera. She'd probably known it was there all along, and her expression shifted, not to anger, not to surprise, to something that looked almost like respect. Then she got back in her car and drove away. But she came back that evening, and she knocked on his door, and when Marcus opened it, she was holding her phone with a video open. "I wanted you to see this," Coren said and pressed play. It was security footage from her driveway. It showed David Patterson in the early morning hours discussing something with a contractor. The audio was difficult to hear, but certain words came through clearly. "Tell him we're buying the property after all, and no more delays, and just want this resolved." "This is from this morning," Coren said, closing the video. "David's been working with the city. Apparently the obstacles to buying the Thompson property have all been resolved. The purchase should close by next month." "Coren," Marcus started, but she held up her hand. "I know what you did," she said. "I don't know how you did it, but I know you delayed the process deliberately. I know you used bureaucratic pressure to force us into negotiating differently. And I want to tell you something, you won. You took that leverage and you forced David to actually fix the problem instead of throwing money at it." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "That's not." "You also hurt me," she continued, and there was something genuine in her voice now. "You hurt me because I thought we'd reached an understanding. I thought we could be friendly neighbors, and instead you were just waiting for the right moment to reactivate that lock and prove that you'd been right all along." "You were stealing from me," Marcus said quietly. "I was," Coren acknowledged. "And when you let it go, I think I actually understood that I'd been wrong. I thought about it a lot, about why I did it, about what made me feel entitled to your charger when I had options." "And," Marcus asked. "And I realized," Coren said, "that I'm the kind of person who doesn't like being told no. I like problems being solved. I like having options. And when you said no instead of respecting that, I figured out how to get around it. It's not a great quality. My therapist thinks it's because I grew up in an environment where I got everything I asked for. And it created this sense that if something wasn't immediately available, I just needed to be patient or creative or resourceful enough to find it anyway." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry," she said, and it sounded like she actually meant it. "I'm sorry for using your charger. I'm sorry for trying to negotiate around your boundaries. I'm sorry for making this whole thing so complicated." Marcus didn't know what to say. This apology was genuine. It was specific. It acknowledged not just the action, but the pattern of thinking that created the action. It was everything an apology was supposed to be. "I'm sorry too," Marcus heard himself say. "I'm sorry for manipulating the property acquisition. That wasn't. I shouldn't have done that." "David figured it out, by the way," Coren said. "I don't know how, but he called some contacts of his, and apparently someone had been making calls to permit offices. He decided not to say anything to you because, and I quote, 'It's fairly brilliant, actually.'" Despite everything, Marcus laughed. It was a small, exhausted laugh, but it was genuine. "So what now?" Coren asked. And Marcus, looking at her standing on his porch with genuine remorse on her face, realized that they'd gone through something together, a full cycle of conflict and escalation and mutual sabotage, and somehow come out the other side still alive. "Now," Marcus said, "I think maybe we start over." Over the next 4 weeks, Marcus and Coren developed an unusual friendship. It wasn't the normal kind. There were no dinners out, no group hangouts with mutual friends, no relationship that would have developed if they'd met any other way. But there was something honest about it. They would run into each other at the charger, sometimes deliberately standing in the driveway at the same time, and they would talk. About life, about regrets, about the strange psychology that makes people behave irrationally when their boundaries feel threatened. The charger remained locked. Marcus had made clear that the equipment would return to private access only. Corinne accepted this with grace. She'd even had the portable charging device professionally installed at her house, finally utilizing the outlet that had been sitting dormant in her driveway the entire time. The Thompson property purchase proceeded without interference. David Patterson closed the deal by mid-January. Construction on the commercial charging station was scheduled to begin in February. Everything, Marcus thought, had been resolved. Then came the second shock. He was working late at his office on a Tuesday evening when he received a call from his bank. The representative was professional but firm. There had been a charge on his account that seemed potentially fraudulent. 23 transactions totaling $4,847, dating back over the course of 6 months. All of them directed to a shell company registered in Nevada. All of them initiated through his home network. "I didn't authorize these," Marcus said immediately. "We understand," the representative said. "We're investigating this as potential identity theft or unauthorized account access. Can you tell me what service these charges are for?" "They're listed as consulting services," the representative said. "The company is registered to an address in Las Vegas. We can help you dispute these, but you may want to contact the company directly first in case these are legitimate charges that appeared fraudulent for system reasons." After he hung up, Marcus opened his laptop and searched the company name. It took him approximately 4 minutes to realize what had happened. The shell company was Michael's. Not directly, it was registered under another name, but the pattern of operation, the structure, the way the transactions were worded made it clear. Michael had been billing him for the work. The calls to permit offices, the communications with city council members, the bureaucratic interference, all of it had been billed as consulting services. Marcus's hands were shaking as he called Michael. "Why did you do that?" Marcus asked, not bothering with preamble. "Do what?" Michael answered, but his tone suggested he knew exactly what Marcus was referring to. "Bill me for those services. I never asked you to do any of that. I never agreed to pay for those services." "You benefited from them," Michael said simply. "You got leverage against David Patterson. You forced him to negotiate differently. That has value." "That's not how this works," Marcus said. "You don't just do something without explicit consent and then bill someone for it." "That's actually exactly how it works," Michael said, and there was no defensiveness in his voice, just a matter-of-fact certainty. "I provided a service. The service had value. You benefited from it. The value should be compensated." "That's theft," Marcus said flatly. "That's business," Michael corrected. "But if you'd prefer, I can dispute the charges with my bank. I'll just file a counterclaim explaining exactly what services were rendered and the value they provided. Then it becomes a legal matter, and your bank will probably side with you because the transaction appeared fraudulent. So you get your money back, but the whole thing goes on record. Your name's attached to deliberate interference with a property transaction. That might not be great for your professional reputation if it gets out." "Are you threatening me?" Marcus asked, his voice feeling very small. "I'm explaining the situation," Michael said. "You wanted leverage, I provided it. I charged for it. If you want to keep things simple, you pay the bill and we move on. If you want to make it complicated, well, complicated is something I'm also good at." Marcus hung up without responding. He sat in his office in the dark, with the lights from downtown reflecting off his computer screen, and tried to process what had happened. He'd made a deal with someone, not explicitly, but implicitly, to engage in unethical business practices against his neighbor. That person, offended that Marcus had then backed away from the conflict and made peace instead of pressing his advantage, had unilaterally billed him thousands of dollars for services rendered without authorization. Michael hadn't wanted Marcus to win the conflict with Corinne. He'd wanted Marcus to crush her with it. And when Marcus had refused to crush her, Michael had extracted payment for his services anyway, partially as compensation, partially as punishment for not seeing the leverage play through to its logical conclusion. The bank was willing to dispute the charges. Marcus could fight them. He could potentially win. But Michael was right. It would require admitting to his bank what had happened, potentially opening up a legal investigation into the nature of the transactions, and definitely exposing Marcus to professional scrutiny if any of this became public knowledge. He was trapped by the very leverage he'd sought to exploit. The next morning, Marcus called Karen. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Something I did, something that happened as a result of my conflict with you." He explained in careful detail exactly what Michael had done, how he'd engineered delays in David's property acquisition, how he'd done it without explicit authorization, how he'd then billed Marcus for the service. Karen listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "So Michael is billing you for psychological warfare," Karen finally said, "that you didn't actually want to continue after you realized it was unethical." "Yes. And he's implying that if you dispute the charges, he'll escalate it into a legal situation that will damage your reputation." "Yes. That's extortion," Karen said simply. "I know," Marcus said, "but if I report it to the police, I'm admitting to what I did, to what I asked him to do to your property transaction." "You asked him to deliberately delay my husband's business deal?" Karen asked, and her tone shifted, became sharper. "Yes," Marcus admitted, "though I later asked him to stop before it got out of hand, and he didn't stop. He actually used the delay to apply more pressure until David felt forced to negotiate differently." Another long pause. "Can I ask you something?" Karen said. "Did you tell David that you'd engineered the delays?" "No," Marcus said. "I wouldn't know how to explain that without making myself look insane." "And does David know that Michael was billing you for those services?" "No, why?" "Because," Karen said slowly, "I think you're in a much stronger position than you realize. You need to tell David." David Patterson's office was on the 42nd floor of the downtown financial center, all floor-to-ceiling windows and abstract art that probably cost more than Marcus's house. David himself sat behind a desk that was large enough to serve as a conference table, and he listened to Marcus's entire explanation without interrupting once. "Let me make sure I understand this," David said when Marcus had finished. "You have a colleague named Michael who, without your explicit authorization, engaged in deliberate interference with my property acquisition. He then billed you $4,847 for these services, and now he's implying that if you dispute the charges, he'll file a counterclaim that essentially amounts to extortion." "Yes," Marcus said. "That's quite a story," David said. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. "You know what strikes me about this story? It's the effort involved. Michael didn't just throw some random problems at me. He created sophisticated, interconnected delays that looked organic, environmental assessments, estate complications, permit holdups. Someone would have to actually investigate to realize that those delays weren't random friction but coordinated interference." "I'm not proud of it," Marcus said. "I'm not asking you to be proud," David said. "I'm telling you that what Michael did requires resources, connections, and technical sophistication. It's not something a random engineer working at a mid-sized firm does on a lark. And that means—" He turned back to face Marcus. "He didn't do this for you. He did this because he wanted to do it. You were just the excuse." David sat back down at his desk and picked up the phone. "I'm calling my attorney," he said. "I want you to tell them everything you just told me. Everything. The charger situation, the conflict with Karen, the smart lock installation, the calls Michael made, the bills he sent you, all of it." "David, I don't think—" "I'm not asking what you think," David said, not unkindly. "I'm telling you what's going to happen. You're going to talk to my attorney. My attorney is going to investigate Michael's activities. If what you're describing is accurate, Michael has engaged in tortious interference with my business dealings, fraud, and extortion. Those are serious matters. But that will require me to admit to my bank exactly what." "Your bank is going to be subpoenaed as part of the investigation," David said simply. "They're going to see the charges regardless. The question is whether you're going to be the victim in this story or a co-conspirator. Right now, based on what you're telling me, you're looking like the former." 3 days later, Marcus found himself in a conference room with 3 attorneys and an investigator hired by David Patterson. He told them everything. All of it. The charger situation, yes, but also every detail about Michael's involvement, every conversation, every implication of threat. The attorneys took notes. The investigator asked clarifying questions, And when it was done, the lead attorney, a woman named Janet with absolutely no patience for nonsense, told him. Michael made a significant tactical error. He documented everything through billing. That documentation is the smoking gun. We won't even need your testimony, though yours certainly helps establish context. It took 2 weeks. 2 weeks of investigations, of document reviews, of forensic accounting examining Michael's consulting company. 2 weeks of Marcus wondering what the consequences would be, how this would affect his career, whether Karen would somehow be angry at him despite him coming clean. Then Michael was arrested. It was a complicated case. The forensic accountants discovered that Michael's consulting shell company had been billing multiple clients for similar services over the past 3 years. Over $180,000 total. Interference in property disputes, business conflicts, personal matters. Michael had turned unethical conflict into a commercial enterprise. The charges included fraud, extortion, tortious interference, and several violations of computer access laws that emerged when investigators looked at how Michael had been gathering the information necessary to engineer his delays. Michael was facing between 5 and 10 years of federal prison time. And Marcus, sitting at his desk at Chen and Associates, felt nothing, not triumph, not even satisfaction, just a strange hollowness where the anger used to be. On the day Michael's case was formally filed, Karen came to Marcus's house with 2 cups of coffee from the cafe down the street. "I thought you might need this," she said, handing him one. They sat on his front porch in the February morning, watching the empty driveway where Karen's Tesla used to park every evening. "How are you feeling?" Karen asked. "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "Like I've been running in a particular direction so hard that I didn't notice when the finish line passed." "For what it's worth," Karen said, "I think you did the right thing telling David. Michael was going to keep doing this to other people. You stopped that." "I feel like I destroyed someone's life," Marcus said. "Someone destroyed their own life," Karen corrected. "You just were honest about what happened. There's a difference." They sat in silence for a moment. "I've been thinking about why I used your charger," Karen said eventually. "Why I kept using it even after you asked me to stop. And I realized something. I wasn't using it because I needed to. I had other options. I was using it because I liked knowing I could get away with something. I liked that someone else had drawn a boundary and I'd figured out how to cross it anyway. It made me feel, I don't know, resourceful, clever." "And now," Marcus asked. "Now I use the portable charger I installed in my own driveway," Karen said. "And you know what? It's fine. It's actually less convenient than your charger was, but I don't feel that constant tension anymore. I don't feel like I'm doing something I shouldn't be doing." "I still feel like I overreacted," Marcus said. "With the lock, with the whole thing." "Maybe," Karen said. "Or maybe you reacted exactly as you should have. You established a boundary. You didn't maintain it because you couldn't handle the conflict. You asked for help, and the help you got turned out to be something toxic. When you realized that, you made it right. That's actually a pretty healthy progression." 3 weeks later, the commercial charging station opened in the empty lot where the Thompson house used to be. It was even better than David had described. 6 charging ports, beautiful landscaping, a small shelter with seating for waiting. The neighborhood HOA had it professionally managed. Property values in the area went up 12%. Karen used it exactly twice in the first month, and then she just used her home charger. The novelty wore off. The convenience faded. The commercial charging station became the kind of thing that was nice to have but not necessary. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, life returned to normal. Marcus's charger remained locked, private, accessed only through his biometric security. But now there was no daily tension about it, no constant vigilance. It was just a tool he owned, used by him alone, exactly as it was supposed to be. On a morning in late March, Marcus woke up early and realized something. He hadn't thought about the charger situation in days, maybe weeks. It had stopped being a defining conflict and became just a thing that had happened. That morning, he saw Karen leaving for work. No Tesla plugged into his charger, just her life continuing normally alongside his. He waved at her. She waved back. 2 neighbors who'd gone through something strange and survived it, now just existing alongside each other in the ordinary world. The case against Michael concluded in May. Pleading guilty to 8 counts of fraud and extortion, Michael received 7 years federal prison and was ordered to repay restitution to all his victims, including Marcus. The amount totaled $4,847 plus damages and legal fees, but by that point it was just a number. The actual violation, the betrayal of someone Marcus had considered a friend, that was what hurt. And yet, sitting with his therapist, Dr. Patricia, in her office with the calming colors and the comfortable chairs, Marcus realized something. He'd learned something important about himself. He could set boundaries. He could maintain them even when it was uncomfortable. And when he realized he'd crossed an ethical line, he could admit it and try to make it right. It's a kind of growth, Dr. Patricia said, even if it arrived through fairly chaotic circumstances. That night, Marcus opened his laptop and deactivated the biometric lock on his charger. Not because he was going to let Karen back, that boundary remained firm, but because he realized the lock itself had become something else. Not a boundary, but a symbol of anger. Not protection, but punishment. He installed a simpler access system, still locked, still private, but open to neighbors if he approved them. He put the charger on an opt-in program where neighborhood residents could request access and Marcus could choose to grant it based on need and respect for boundaries. No one requested access, but the offer was there and somehow that mattered. 3 months later, in June, Marcus ran into Karen at the grocery store. She was buying the same specialty tea that had been in the gift basket she'd given him back in December, the one he'd never opened. "How have you been?" she asked. "Good," Marcus said, and meant it. "Really good, you." "Good too," Karen said. "David's got the charging station completely operational now. He's actually been approached about rolling it out as a template for other residential neighborhoods. Apparently our situation became a case study for urban infrastructure development or something." "That's amazing," Marcus said, and realized he actually meant that too. "It is," Karen agreed. "And you know what's funny? If I'd just respected your boundary when you first asked me to stop using the charger, none of this would have happened. No conflict, no escalation, no whole situation with Michael and everything that came after." "Would you change it," Marcus asked, "if you could go back?" Karen considered this seriously for a moment. "No," she said finally. "I don't think I would. I think I needed to learn that boundaries are real and that not respecting them has consequences. I think the whole conflict, as uncomfortable as it was, made me a better person." "Even the part with Michael and the extortion?" Marcus asked. "Especially that part," Karen said. "That part made it clear that when you try to use dirty methods to solve problems, dirty methods have a way of metastasizing. That you either approach things with integrity or you accept that your solution is going to be compromised." Walking through the grocery store parking lot, Marcus realized something he hadn't expected. He'd forgiven her. Completely. Not because she'd asked him to, not because she'd done anything particular to earn it, but simply because they'd both learned something from the conflict, and there was no longer any reason to maintain the anger. And in forgiving her, he'd somehow managed to forgive himself, for the boundary violation, for seeking revenge, for allowing Michael to corrupt his intentions. It was all part of the same story now, an escalation and de-escalation, a cycle of conflict and resolution that had taught him something about the person he was and the person he wanted to be. As Marcus drove home, his empty charger sitting in his driveway, waiting to be used or not used entirely at his discretion, he realized that the whole thing had been incredibly stupid and incredibly important. And sometimes he thought those were the same thing. The charger never did get used again, but that was okay. The coffee shop 2 blocks from Marcus's house had become his Thursday morning routine. Every week at 9 a.m., he'd sit at the corner table with his laptop, working on projects, reading emails, existing in public spaces in the way of freelance engineers and writers, and people who work from home and need occasional interaction with human beings. One Thursday in June, almost exactly 1 year after the charging station opened, he was on his 3rd coffee when Karen walked in. They weren't friends in any conventional sense. They didn't hang out. They didn't have dinner. But they had a familiarity now, the kind that comes from understanding someone deeply through conflict rather than through regular connection. "Can I sit?" Karen asked, gesturing to the empty chair at his table. "Of course," Marcus said. "I wanted to tell you something," Karen said, sitting down. "David and I are getting divorced." Marcus blinked. "Oh, I'm sorry." "Don't be," Karen said. "It's actually good. The charging station project was supposed to make things better between us, but it just kind of highlighted that we'd been building toward this for a while. Once the divorce is done, I'm thinking of moving to something smaller. I don't need this big house anymore. And honestly, it's weird living in the neighborhood knowing about everything that happened with the charger and Michael and all of it. Where will you go? Marcus asked. I'm not sure yet, Karen said. Maybe back to the city, maybe somewhere completely different. I've been freelancing for the consulting company, so I can work from anywhere. She smiled, and it was a genuine smile. Not the performance smile Marcus had seen so many times before, but something real and grounded. I wanted to thank you, Karen said, for being honest, for telling David about what Michael did, for not pretending that the conflict was simpler than it was. It forced me to think about a lot of things. Like what? Marcus asked. Like why I'm the kind of person who doesn't respect boundaries, Karen said. Like why my first instinct is to find a workaround instead of accepting limitations. Like why I married someone who doesn't respect boundaries either, and somehow I didn't see that we were basically the same thing in different packages. Therapy? Marcus asked. Oh God, yes, Karen said. So much therapy. I'm paying someone very good money to help me understand why I'm like this. But that's okay. I like understanding myself better. She finished the coffee she'd ordered and stood up to leave. One more thing, Karen said. I never did steal your electricity again after that first lock. Even when it was deactivated for those weeks, I didn't use it. And I want you to know that was intentional. I wanted to prove, to myself more than to you, that I could respect a boundary even if I didn't like it. Thank you for telling me that, Marcus said. After Karen left, Marcus sat in the coffee shop for another hour, thinking about boundaries and growth, and the strange ways that conflict can sometimes lead to genuine change. His charger was still in his driveway. It had never been used again after those first months with Karen. But that was fine. It was his to use or not use. His boundary maintained not through anger but through clarity. 6 months later, Karen's house sold to a young family with a Tesla and 2 children. Marcus had never heard if they'd requested access to his charger. He assumed not, and that, he thought, was probably how it was supposed to be.